Have you guys ever dipped yourselves in honey and gone and rolled around in an anthill? It's one of the most erotic experiences you can have. Oh shit, are we recording? Welcome to the Pod People, the show where we definitely don't dip ourselves in honey and go roll around in anthills. I'm your non-sticky ant-covered host, Matisse Van Rossum, and I'm joined by two other non-sticky ant-covered boys, Ben Sheets.
I'm an undead combat vet.
And Eugene Lundeen.
I'm here to find virgins.
The year is 1974, and today we're going to be talking about a selection of films from 1974 that we picked basically at random. But before we do, it's time for a little trailer breakdown.
Yeah, instead of some news, there's kind of a slow news week. We watched 3 trailers for movies coming out soon, and we're gonna kind of discuss a little bit. So we watched the trailer for the new Predator coming out,
which we did make predictions for at the beginning of the year. I totally missed the release date. Did you see when it's coming out?
this year.
This year. The Predator is directed by Shane Black, who most recently did The Nice Guys. He hasn't done anything since then, has he?
Nope.
The Nice Guys, so. Iron Man 3, the legendary Lethal Weapon movies.
Yeah. He was actually in the original Predator.
Oh, yes, that's right. He's one of the soldiers, right?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
He also wrote it, so...
That's very cool. So yeah, he seems very intimate with it, and I really like a lot of his movies. Nice Guys and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang are both just like I think really funny.
He's a fantastic writer.
Movies.
Yeah, I love Shane Black. I thought The Nice Guys was great. Super underrated.
I even liked Iron Man 3, and
I liked Iron Man 3 too.
Actually, I think it's underrated.
Awesome.
I think it's a really smartly written movie.
Iron Man 3 gets a lot of flack. A lot of people say that it's the worst Iron Man, but
I
it's not.
hate the Mandarin fake out, which I actually
I thought it was so clever.
I thought that was fine. And so I don't remember my predictions, but I hope that I made them high.
I think we all predicted that this will do fairly well.
Yes, and it seems, I mean, from the
at least critically.
Yeah.
From the beginning, it's going to be very like tongue-in-cheek, very goofy. Like
so the trailer starts out with this kid playing with like.
He finds this box full of a bunch of Predator gear.
Yeah, I don't know why. That's just
maybe he's Arnold's son. Maybe he's Danny Glover's son. Who knows? Because he was in Predator 2. Yeah, he finds, I guess, this little pod which controls a Predator ship, and he's playing with it like a toy,
smashing it into block towers, and then it cuts to the Predator ship like banging into mountains and crashing into trees and shit, which I thought was very funny. And I really hope that this movie is campy, because Shane Black does camp really well, and the first Predator was really campy, and even Predators that came out in 2010 or something, 2009.
Yeah, I thought that movie was a whole lot of fun.
I really enjoyed that movie too.
The one thing I'm worried about a little bit is it going too campy, because I think even Predators, as well as the original Predator, still maintain an element of tension in them.
Oh, for sure. Well, you can do camp and tension simultaneously.
They're campy, but the characters aren't always in on the joke,
No.
It's not really self-aware. I think that's the key difference.
And at least based on the trailer, it doesn't seem like that's the approach.
Yeah.
I hope so, at least. I mean, the trailer doesn't show a whole lot.
I guess we're getting evolving Predator.
Yeah, they're hybridizing, which, I mean, are they just banging people?
Well, hey, I mean, they get down with a whole bunch of different species, and I'm sure it must get lonely, the life of a predator. So, just...
Sexual Predator.
Yeah.
A film by Shane Black. I was surprised that there was actually some blood in this trailer. You don't usually see blood in non-red band trailers, but I mean, I would expect a Predator movie to be very gory.
Yeah, I'm guessing like that's the only footage they could use.
Probably. I mean, The Predator as a concept is kind of campy, just like a big dreadlocked alien with all of these really ridiculous over-the-top weapons.
From the trailer, it seemed like they were going into like a city,
Much like
which
Predator 2.
reminded me of Predator 2, which
Yeah,
I actually
Predator in the
am
Hood.
not a big fan of.
Oh, I like Predator 2.
It's
It's really
okay.
it's dumb, but I mean, I love Danny Glover.
I haven't seen
Yeah,
that
Danny
movie in
Glover's great.
years. I don't even
Danny
remember.
Glover carries that movie, but I don't think it hits the level of like Predator or even
No.
Predators.
I don't know if I would agree with that, but I do agree that it doesn't reach the same heights as Predator. But overall, I have good expectations for this movie. As long as it's fun, I don't mind if it's a little bit stupid.
I agree. The way this could fail is to look at something like Alien vs. Predator Requiem, where it tried to do silly things, but without the self-awareness, so it just comes off very
Man,
awkward.
the Alien vs. Predator movies are so grim, dark, and obnoxious.
Right.
Like,
I
even with
actually
this-
kind of like the first Alien versus Predator movie.
well, you're wrong.
It's a little overly serious, but it hits campy points. at
When's the
times.
last time you saw it?
2014, 2015.
That's around the last time I saw it too, and I did not like it. It scared me when I was little.
Requiem is
is
dumb.
bad. We'll agree to disagree on that.
Well, and the big difference between the new one and those are Paul W.S. Anderson is not directing
Yes,
this
yeah,
one.
that's right.
Thank God. Let's talk about the next trailer.
Yeah, so next trailer we got was a movie called... I'm already forgetting the name, damn.
Climax.
Climax, yes.
The new Gaspar Noé film.
Yep, it's a dance horror movie.
I didn't get much from that trailer. It was mostly just a lot of quick cutting of a dance party with
A sangria ad
Yeah, it looked like a
cut in.
sangria ad and disco music and
Les Vinyls.
yeah, Le Vinyls. There's a little bit of blood and somebody was on fire for a second, but other than that, I could not tell anything. But if I know Gaspar Noé, there's gonna be lots of unsimulated sex.
That's great, because I have not seen any of his movies. I've only caught little clips from other people watching it.
You haven't seen Enter the Void?
No, I've not. I remember you guys were watching it one day, and the one scene I saw, it was near the end where it's like it's sperm basically floating through.
Oh my
into
god.
the room.
I love Enter the Void, but the Love Hotel scene at the end is unnecessary and indulgent.
Enter the Void is like an almost 3-hour movie that could easily be like under 2 hours.
Or right around 2 hours. I agree. There's about an hour that you could cut out. I mean, the last 30 minutes is that fucking Love Hotel scene,
Yeah.
pretty much, which is just
Unnecessary.
yeah. And I didn't see Love. I heard it was good, but it's like Nymphomaniac, just like several hours of unsimulated sex, and it's like, if I want to watch unsimulated sex, you just watch porn, you know? Like, I don't understand that fascination with like being edgy and having people actually have sex in a real movie.
It's artsy. You're trying to capture something not seen before, even if it's just
It's
like
hyper stylistic too.
I just feel bad for the
cinematographer
actors.
that did Spring Breakers did Love apparently as well,
Yes, that's true, and he is one of my favorite cinematographers.
which makes me want to watch it, but at the same time, I'm not jumping to it.
I wouldn't, just based on the trailer for Climax, I wouldn't be surprised if he also shot that movie.
No, I wouldn't
It looked
either.
very similar, lots of sort of like oversaturated neon and like dark, grimy hallways and shit.
That's kind of Gaspar Noé's MO.
Yes, true. And I've never seen Irreversible. I haven't been able to bring myself to watch it just because of the 10-minute
Honestly,
rape scene.
yeah, like I watched it a few years back, but I fast forwarded through the rape scene.
I think I probably would.
It's
too.
excessive. You're not missing out on anything not seeing it.
Well,
'Cause
right.
It's just a fucking static shot of rape going on.
For
and
like
it's
10 solid minutes,
It's
right?
gratuitous.
Yeah,
it's excessive.
It seems like Gaspar Noé's movies are movies that would be hard to watch with your parents.
Oh yeah. Well, hard to watch with anybody, honestly.
But that seems right. Yeah.
Gaspar Noé's middle name is actually Edgelord. I watched his first movie, the one he did before Irreversible. I think it's called I Stand Alone.
Like that Godsmack song?
Yeah, exactly.
Stand alone.
It's about this like loner who like hates people. He's like a butcher who sells horse meat, and which is technically illegal in France.
The horse meat black market.
Yeah.
The high demand for illegal
Well, he just
horse
pretends
meat.
it's other meat, essentially.
Why would anybody want to eat horse meat?
I mean, it's probably cheap.
So yeah, Climax is gonna be a thing.
It's gonna be a climax.
It will probably be good because Gaspar Noé's a good filmmaker, but it will probably be extremely uncomfortable.
It's gonna be a climax of sexual proportions.
All right. Well, why don't we talk about our last trailer now?
All right. So the last trailer we watched and we're covering is the trailer for the First Purge that's coming out on the 4th of July.
'Cause America. Fuck
So
yeah.
essentially this movie is all about, when they first started doing the Purge.
Which is a story that I never wanted, honestly. I think one of the interesting things about the Purge universe, and the only Purge movie I legitimately enjoy is the second one, Anarchy, but I've always found it interesting that it just exists in a universe where this Purge happens once a year, and they always talk about the new founding fathers, but they don't explain that shit. And now they're going back and having a whole movie explaining that shit.
Yeah.
It looks dumb. I know that you are a little bit fonder of the Purge movies than I am.
Yeah, well, I like the second one a lot. The third one was dumb, but it was better than the first.
I don't know if I agree with that.
The first kind of falls too much into cliche trappings of the slasher genre.
Yeah, the first one feels a
And
lot
the dialogue is
like
awful.
a Stranger's knockoff.
Yeah. I'm cautiously looking forward to this one. I think it's going to be bad, but maybe it'll be entertaining.
I think that the problem with the Purge movies for me is that sort of like how we were talking about with Veronica, it's like a lot of it is just cool set pieces that they have designed, and then they sort of tried half-heartedly to build a story around it, which they don't really succeed in doing, because, like, at least the last two, it's mostly just going from one location to the next where people in scary masks try to kill them.
What are some cool things we can show? Well, let's put a bunch of lights on a car.
Yeah, let's cover a car in Christmas lights.
No, I agree that's a big problem with them. The other big problem I have is they fall into the trapping of if you have a purge, automatically everyone is homicidal.
Right.
There would be a lot more white collar crime than anything. People like embezzling money and stealing money.
Yeah, that just the assumption that if nothing is illegal for a night, that everybody's just gonna go out and start killing anybody they can find. I mean, I guess this new one is gonna kind of delve into that. We see in the trailer.
Yeah, I like how they played with that from the gate in the trailer, how they showed just everyone partying right off the bat.
Right, and then the government are like, oh, well, this needs to be successful, so we're gonna send out soldiers dressed as civilians to kill people.
Which is very stupid, especially since they're not at all dressed as soldiers.
Exactly. Not even close.
Civilians.
They're coming in on like jeeps and shit, and they're just like they're all deploying with assault rifles.
They have fucking tactical gear. They don't look like civilians.
Hey, where did those civilians get all that tac gear? Ugh!
Hey, but this is America, so I'm sure that you could find many of people who aren't military that have that same exact getup. They're their own urban warriors.
I'm just worried that in Trump's America, this new Purge movie is going to be extremely preachy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All of the Purge movies have had a veneer of like political thought, but it has always been really shallow.
Well, yeah, and it's super ham-fisted. It's like, the government is bad. Did you know that the government is bad? The government doesn't care if you die because the government's bad.
Well, that's the
It's
nice
like,
thing
okay,
about
well, explore that more, please.
the second one, because it's more like rich people are bad.
Right.
You know?
And then in the third one, it's the government is bad again.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess there's an escalation. In the first one, it's just like, people are bad. Then rich people are bad. Then the government is bad. And now the government is really bad. All right, well, I guess we will see what these movies are like when they come out. Check out the trailers for yourself. Hit us up on social media and let us know what you think of these movies and some of your expectations. But now, let's get into our discussion of the films of 1974.
I was honestly really surprised by the ones we ended up choosing. Cause
Yeah, same.
I had not heard of any of these. I know you guys have you had seen like at least one of these other movies.
Well, Ben had
before.
seen Phase 4 and I had seen Death Dream, but none of us had seen Blood for Dracula. And honestly, like, 1974 was a banger of a year for horror movies.
Yeah.
Like, Black Christmas and Texas
Texas
Chainsaw
Chainsaw
are like two of my favorite horror movies of all time. I was kind of expecting a low bar for some of these movies that we watched and was overall pleasantly surprised. Let's start with the first one we watched, which was Blood of Dracula, presented by Andy Warhol.
Yeah, so Blood for Dracula is I guess you could call it like a New York art house take on
Yeah, well, hey, it's Andy Warhol,
the
so
classic horror movie. Well, it's directed by John Morrissey.
Paul Morrissey.
Paul
I think.
Morrissey,
Who's
yeah.
he was a frequent collaborator with Andy Warhol. I think he directed also like whatever like big cult trilogy Andy Warhol did before all of that. So they've worked together a lot. Apparently, this was also made around the same time that Frankenstein movie was being made too.
Well, the year before, they had put out a movie called Flesh for Frankenstein, which is their take on the Frankenstein story, which I haven't seen.
I haven't seen that either.
I've heard pretty good things about that one, too.
I think the concept of Blood for Dracula is really interesting. It's like a modernized take on the Dracula story in which Dracula, who is dying, is trying to find the blood of a virgin in the age of, like, sexual liberation.
It's not virgin, it's a virgin.
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 I must have thy virgin blood.
Because the actor who plays Dracula, I guess Udo
Kier.
Yes, Udo Kier, who I had not realized he was in Lars von Trier's Melancholia, but he was just one of those big B-movie actors.
He's a legendary character actor at this point.
And to be perfectly honest, I would go as far as to say he's about the only good thing about this movie. I as much praise as I have for this year, I was pretty underwhelmed by this movie in general.
Well, it's trying to have a grander, artsier message than just Dracula, hunting for virgins. He sort of represents like the wealthy upper class.
It's a class struggle.
Yes,
movie.
right.
Yeah.
Because the wealthy family he ends up encountering that they're sort of in the dumps. They're losing money and they want to try and marry off their daughters just to sort of make connections
Into wealth.
And, yes,
Yeah.
right. And
Fucking the father is played by famous
right.
director Vittorio De Sica,
We did like Bicycle Thieves and
a master
Umberto D.
of the Italian new wave of the 50s and 60s.
The whole neo-realist
Yeah, the
movement was
neo-realism.
sparked by him.
De Sica's great. His character is really funny in this movie too because he's like weirdly obsessed with the phonetics of Dracula's name.
Yeah, right. He just likes how it
keeps
sounds.
He keeps talking about how much he likes the sound of the name Dracula. Dracula. He keeps saying it over and over. It has 3 syllables. And like how it's a sign of like good upbringing or whatever. Because Dracula travels with his manservant to Italy because he thinks that in such a staunchly Catholic country he'll find lots and lots of virgins.
Right, like the church just produces virgins just like on some sort of manufacturing line. He's like, everyone there's gonna be virgins. Come on, you can find everything.
He has like Dracula has like a butler. The chemistry between those two I thought was really funny in the movie.
Apparently they're also like Udo Kier plays Frankenstein in Flesh of Frankenstein, and that his butler in Dracula also plays Igor in that.
Oh,
so
interesting.
That's funny.
They seem to have a
almost
lot
have
of
like a Ren and Stimpy like chemistry, which I really dug. I thought that was pretty funny how like the butler was there for his every need, but Dracula would just like bitch at him and
Dracula is in this movie is such a like whiny emo teenager kind of character,
and I love it.
It's so funny.
I think it's such an interesting shift from your classic Dracula portrayal where he's like super imposing and
evil,
scary,
yeah.
Right, well, he's
handsome.
he's either suave and menacing, or the flip side is just where he's absolutely monstrous and just like gross to look at, like in Werner Herzog's Nosferatu, or even the original,
right?
Just like that.
They really do
this kind of hits the middle, just like he's just kind of old and sad.
Yeah, they do a
little
great
wimp.
job of setting him up as kind of a pathetic character. The
He's
first
so
thing we
whiny.
see in the movie is him like putting on a bunch of makeup and like painting his hair black.
Yeah, right, just taking like a big fat old paintbrush.
So he doesn't look so old and decrepit.
It's like he has Udo Kier in this movie has like 2 extremes. He's either moping or he's pitching a temper tantrum, and they're both hilarious.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure wealthy people do. They don't get what they want. They throw a fit, and he wants margins. But
Apparently, Udo Kier lost like 20 pounds in a week before they started shooting.
In a week?
He
Oh
was
my God.
he was so when they started filming, he was like so frail and sickly that he could like barely walk.
jeez, well, he's
Works
in a
well for the movie.
right.
Well, yeah, he does have a wheelchair.
Right, so maybe that was just like they had to work that into the script because he actually needed it.
And I think that stuff worked well for me. Where the movie loses me is in the subplot of this super Marxist like servant, not a servant, but like
Farmhand,
like
He's
a farmhand who works for the family.
He's the working class that is being abused by the upper class, the wealth, played by Joe D'Alessandro, who I guess was a big like figure just like in the New York underground scene.
Well,
a big collaborator with Andy Warhol.
The funny thing is like most of these actors and actresses are like foreign and
very thick accents,
like accents
kind of
that
hard to
like
understand sometimes.
the accent's so thick that you question whether they actually speak English
Right.
at all,
Yeah.
or if they're just memorizing English lines.
But Joe,
But then Joe D'Alessandro just talks like a dude from Brooklyn.
He has a thick Brooklyn accent.
it's like, yeah, everyone else up until this point has those, thick European accents, and then he walks into frame, he's like, hey, what are you girls doing out here? Because the girls, the daughters of the family are also, they're sexual deviants.
They're incestuous lesbians.
Incestuous lesbians, yes,
as
that's right.
it's described.
Yeah.
in
Who
the
also
movie.
use Mario is
Joe D'Alessandro's character.
He is used. He is used, and he also uses them for sex and things of that nature. He is the foil to Dracula, but I can say that he's actually much better than Dracula.
Oh my god, he's fucking despicable. Like if they're trying to make a statement about like class struggles, like the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat or whatever, Mario is awful.
Right.
He's like abusive at one point after having sex with the two sisters. He asks them what their 14-year-old sister's up to. He's like, I could sure go to rape the hell out of her right now.
Oh my god.
It's
yes,
like,
that-
what?
Rape he does.
And rape he does.
Oh my god, right, because this might be jumping ahead too much. I don't know if we want to give spoilers away for
That's
this.
fine. We don't have to go too deep into the plot.
But that Mario realizes this at a certain point, that he's a vamp. I don't know how he figures out.
Because Dracula brings his coffin with him.
And
yes.
he opens up the coffin and sees
Which he
it's,
first
like,
establishes as like holding his like dead father.
The remains of like an uncle or something
Right.
that he's traveling with.
Which is just like a strange cover, but hey, you got to get your coffin in somehow. When he realizes that he's been desiring virgins, he tells the 14-year-old girl, he's like, how about I take that virginity?
Oh yeah, he's like, why don't you think about losing that virginity? And so he rapes her, so Dracula can't turn her into a vampire.
Yeah, this movie is it's very, very confusing, but it's trying to, I guess, make a statement in some way that the wealthy bourgeoisie, they're awful, but the working class.
Nobody's good in this.
Yeah, exactly. That
Dave
everyone's
Chappelle
bad.
joke about Cosby, where he's like, he rapes but he saves, but he rapes more than he saves.
That's Mario, all right.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like, nobody is really the good guy in this movie, but I would say that Dracula is the most sympathetic character because he's literally just trying to survive.
Right. Even though he literally sucks the blood out of people. He is
Well, yeah, I mean,
much
he's
more
a vampire,
relatable.
but he's just trying to not die,
Yeah, well, it's funny. Throughout the movie, the whole conceit is, he goes through these 4 daughters, one by one, trying to court them,
trying to figure out who is a virgin.
Yeah, and he sucks the first 2 and immediately just vomits out all of their blood.
Well, the first time his face turns green, they do that weird effect where like his face glows bright green.
Yeah,
And then
that was hilarious.
For a good 2 minutes, he's just gagging in this bathroom.
It seemed like he was
blood.
actually puking.
It's so over the top. I would say a good chunk of this movie, Udo Kier is just writhing around on the floor, like
my
spitting
favorite
up
one
blood.
was where he was in the bed, just like convulsing.
Oh yes,
wildly.
before because he's craving the blood, and yeah, it's focused on him, just like the camera hovering above the bed as he's shaking violently because he hasn't had anything.
I would say like this movie is not very long. What is it like? It was like an hour and 20 something minutes.
No, it was like the longest one we watched. It was like an hour 45.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that you could probably cut 15 minutes out of it just by trimming certain shots down.
Well, that's the thing. Out of the 3 movies we watched, it was by far the longest, but it should have been the shortest.
It should have been. Like, back to what I was saying doesn't work for me is just like, there's so many scenes where Mario and these 2 sisters are just having really nasty conversations about like Marxism and like sexual liberation, where Mario is just being a total fucking shithead. Sometimes these conversations are happening while they're having sex.
You better be careful. That Russian Revolution.
Oh yeah.
They took all the money from the rich people. So all you got is your looks.
And at one point,
Bitch.
he's like, if Dracula's here looking for virgins, what the hell does he want with you 2 whores? And it just goes on for so long, and it's so boring and I don't care. And the sex scenes are all really weird and long. A lot of this movie gave me hardcore, like, The Room vibes.
Especially with those extended sex scenes.
The extended sex scenes.
They were missing a killer soundtrack.
Yeah.
No, that's true. The Room really kills it with sex scene music overlaid.
And we get an extended Roman Polanski cameo in this. Because I guess he was filming one of his movies nearby at the time.
Well, his movie was actually also a vampire movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the one that he was shooting.
Oh,
So
what was it?
Fuck if I know.
Okay, all right.
I read that, but
Interesting.
yeah.
What is the name of the movie that he was shooting?
yeah, that's the question. What?
What?
is it called?
What's it called?
Yeah, it's called What?
That's what we want to
that's
know.
my question. Third base.
And apparently, he wears the same mustache in both movies.
Oh, nice. Hack.
Hack.
Cheap hack. That's his only issue.
Yeah.
The only problem
He did
I have.
Roman Polanski
Justice
is-
League where like they had to like fake put
CG out Henry Cavill's mustache.
And he shows up in such a segue in the movie. It doesn't it's not relevant to anything. Dracula's servant is down in the bar cuz I guess Dracula can also eat vegetables.
Yeah, he just can't
He's just
eat,
disgusted by
he can
them.
only eat virgin meat.
Right.
and vegetables.
And Roman Polanski's there playing some weird bar game that I don't get. It's like you have to imitate his movements, but how do you win? Like how do you beat imitating his movements? I don't get it.
Yeah, it goes on for a really long time. It's super weird. Roman Polanski plays this game with Dracula's manservant.
But then some woman runs into the bar and screams that a 13-year-old, that a young girl had been hit by a car. And of course, Roman Polanski runs as fast as he can over to wherever a 13-year-old girl is. But Dracula's servant grabs a loaf of bread and just like, in a very elaborate like speech he gives, like he
explains every single step of what he did. It's like, oh my god.
I thought it was really funny though. He like dived onto this corpse pretending to fall.
and let the virgin blood soak into the bread, and then he takes it back to Dracula.
It's like, if there are people there, they probably still saw you pick up that bread loaf.
That's the
and they
thing.
think
You
you're
know, he
crazy.
explained it one way, but like to an outside observer watching that, it was probably the weirdest thing.
God.
Yeah, there's just so much fat that could be trimmed out of this movie. Like, for a movie called Blood for Dracula, I feel like Dracula is not a big enough part of this movie.
Unfortunately not. No, they spend much more time with Mario, I feel.
Yeah, and he's not a relatable character. He's a total fucking scumbag.
It seems he's not intended to like be relatable, but that just doesn't make for very interesting like
but then
scenes
then he becomes the hero at the end.
Yeah, that's when it should be called Blood of Dracula because he starts bleeding out like crazy.
That scene is very funny.
Yeah.
When Mario confronts Dracula and he has an axe.
Yeah, I believe so.
And he just starts chasing Dracula around this big mansion and cutting off his limbs one by one, like Monty Python style.
Hey, and the first time it happens, because it's not a super effect-heavy movie or anything.
It's not very bloody, no.
I can't recall any other moments where there was anything like in the way of like
only other
prosthetics.
graphic scenes were him puking blood.
Yes, right. But in that moment, like when Mario swings the axe, there's like the fake arm falls off and it starts squirting out like a hose on the wall, and it's it certainly is a nice little like jolt of energy because this is like the last 5 minutes of the movie at this point, so just really going all out. But
yeah, and the funny thing is this movie came out only a year before Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And I almost wonder if the Black Knight scene in the Holy Grail is a reference to to this part in Blood of Dracula because the resemblance is
Uncanny.
Is uncanny.
Yeah, right.
He's chasing Dracula around, cutting off his limbs one at a time until he's literally just a torso lying on the ground, and then he drives a stake through his heart and kills him, and then he gets the 14-year-old girl who he just raped 10 minutes prior.
Yes, but not before one of because the older sisters, they had non-virgin blood. When Dracula bit them, they became subdued sexual. They remained incestuous lesbians, but they were just under his spell in some way. And one of them, because
it's the oldest sister.
Oh, it's the oldest sister
who I guess was actually a virgin, because they make a point that she never married, and that if a vampire drinks a virgin's blood, that they become a full-fledged vampire. And she does sort of throw herself on him at the end, and she has the fangs,
and she falls directly.
Directly onto the stake, and then Mario walks off with his 14-year-old girlfriend now, I guess.
Yeah. And
then the movie just ends.
Because at that point, I think everyone else in the family has died. The mother gets shot by Dracula's servant. Dracula's servant gets shot in the head by the mother. I don't remember what happened to the father.
He left on a trip.
He just left?
Yeah, he just left. Desika just left.
He's just gonna come back and everyone's going to be dead.
Yeah, he's gonna be very confused.
At least Dracula had a good name. I don't know who you're supposed to root for in this movie.
I mean, do you have to root for anyone?
I think it's allegorical.
That everybody sucks. The bourgeoisie and the proletariat. It's all bad.
Yes. Yeah.
I guess so. I don't know. This movie did not do a lot for me in the long run. Udo Kier hamming it up, it makes for some very funny scenes, but not enough to justify the hour and 45 minutes it takes to watch this movie, I think. I would say it'd be better to just find some clips of Udo Kier being real hammy, and that ending where he just gets all of his limbs cut off.
Right. I didn't have as much of a problem with this movie as you guys did, I think. I thought the Mario character was kind of funny just because his thick Brooklyn accent was so different than everyone else.
Right, and I don't have a real issue with him being unsympathetic. I think it makes him a more a more interesting character to see on screen. I think just all of the bigger themes they were trying to go for didn't land with me, and it just it didn't provide for a lot of very interesting moments outside of what Udo Kier was doing, because he was good.
None of the daughters are particularly good actresses.
I think that's a big problem too. It just seems like the acting is especially with their accents too. Sometimes it's hard to even understand what they're saying.
I'm pretty sure one of them was French. Most of them sounded Italian, but there's that one girl, I think she was the oldest one. I'm already forgetting shit about this movie. I think that's
right. Yeah, I think so.
But one of them had a French accent, which I thought was really weird.
It's if Mario, the Italian farmhand, can sound like he just came from the Bronx, then at that point Andy Warhol didn't care that much, I'm sure. And it's interesting because I guess this is in Criterion.
It was one of the first releases. I think it's 16 or 17.
I'm gonna posit something that is sort of in the vein of people liking movies because they're in different languages. I'm gonna say that I think the reason this movie is so critically acclaimed is because it has Andy Warhol's name attached to it. I don't think it's that great of a movie.
Well, and
the fact that it's in Criterion is kind of confusing to me.
I think Udo Kier gives a great performance, and it's a really original take on Dracula.
I think
that whole New York scene is really important in terms of film history.
Sure. So. I don't know. Maybe this was better maybe it made more sense in the era that it came out in the 70s, and that time of sort of sexual liberation, and it was during the Cold War and
Right.
stuff like that. Maybe it's just it doesn't work
And I think
through a modern lens.
And just like how Joe D'Alessandro seems so strange to us as a character, that the fact he became sort of like a cult sex symbol because he was in like Flesh and Heat, and he I'm sure he represented something completely different than what we get from it now, and just the context of the other movies Andy Warhol made at that time, just like how he made Flesh of Frankenstein, and it seems like a lot like Joe D'Alessandro's in that as well, so it seems there's a lot of overlap between those two productions, and so he was on some sort of roll, Andy Warhol, but
I guess so.
I think it makes it a little more ineffective in this day and age.
Yeah, I feel like it just hasn't aged super well. It's really
Still a lot of really cool things.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting concept, and like we've been saying, Udo Kier is really good. Although I don't know if I would say his performance is so much good as it is just very funny and how over the top it is.
I think it's genuinely good. He pulls a very campy performance, but there is a lot. I do
buy it.
Skill in it.
I can agree with that.
He does do a good job portraying Dracula as a very pathetic character.
Yeah,
and
that's
honestly, true. the puking scenes seem real. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he was like legitimately throwing up a little bit.
Could be. Should we rate this? Unless you guys have anything else you want to talk about?
No, I'm fine jumping into ratings.
Let's jump in.
Okay. I think that it's a very fun movie at times, mostly with Udo Kier, and the ending is great. And I mean, I don't like Mario, but Joe D'Alessandro's performance is, I guess, noteworthy in just how sort of despicable he is. Ultimately, I find a lot of the movie very boring. Most of the acting is not great, and there's just some really baffling things that happen in it that don't make sense from a narrative standpoint. I think I'm going to give this a 2.5 out of 5 pods.
All right, for a movie called Blood for Dracula, I feel like there wasn't quite enough blood or Dracula in it. But I think Udo Kier gives a fantastic performance. I think it's a really original take on the Dracula idea. Instead of, an imposing, scary Dracula, it's kind of a weak, frail, pathetic, whiny bitch Dracula, which I like. I thought the whole class struggle in that was kind of interesting too, how, he was just kind of a rich boy who got everything he wanted, especially with his butler getting what he wanted and what he needed. I agree, it drags a little bit in the middle. The sisters, or the daughters, their performances aren't very good. The Mario character was interesting in how baffling his character is and how unapologetic he is. And I thought De Sica did a really good performance too. It was weirdly sincere in a really funny way. It's not a perfect movie, but I don't think it's a bad movie either. If anything, I would watch it for the last 15 minutes and all of Udo Kier's performance. I would probably give this a 3 out of 5.
I think I'd give it a 3 as well. I think there are a lot of things that people could get out of this that I did not get. Maybe people would appreciate the sort of underlying themes more than I did, and they might find it much more entertaining than how I felt it dragged in a lot of times. But there's still a lot of really good things in it that overall left me with a good impression. I don't know a lot about Andy Warhol or Paul Morrissey and their collaborations together, but it's made me interested in all that. So I'd say that's an accomplishment in itself. So yeah, a 3 out of 5 for me.
Okay, well, that will give Blood for Dracula an average rating of 2.8 pods out of 5. And now we're going to move on to our next film, Phase 4. And I don't know about you guys, but this is the one that took me the most by surprise.
Oh,
I had seen this before, so I knew what I was getting into, but I didn't remember liking it as much as I did this time.
I like, based on the premise of like ants forming a collective consciousness and like attacking some scientists in the desert, I was expecting like super campy B-movie fun schlock, and I think this film is much more intelligent than that.
Honestly,
it does some
yeah.
really interesting experimental narrative stuff that really, really, really took me by surprise.
Yeah, well, this was directed by Saul Bass, who is a legendary graphic designer. He did, most of the Hitchcock posters and title sequences, for Psycho, Vertigo, North by Northwest.
Wow.
He's a legendary title producer, too. He even did later movies like Goodfellas. He did the title sequence for that movie.
Oh, wow.
A lot of
No way.
big
Holy shit.
movies he's done, and a lot of big posters, but he's very influential in the graphic design space. A really important figure, especially in the 60s and 70s. But this was his only film that he ever did, which I find really interesting because it's his first and only one, and it's really solid for being a first foray into film.
Well, like, first, right off the bat, the whole movie looks pretty freaking cool. The story itself, I don't remember if it was like there was like a meteor or something, or just like
it's very loosely explained. There's some sort of cosmic event. Based on the first couple of shots, I imagined it to be some sort of like planetary alignment or something, but they don't really explain what it is. But all of a sudden, these colonies of ants in the desert become like super smart.
And there's all of these just super magnified shots of all these ants, and it looks awesome. And I'm pretty sure that they're real ants. I don't think
they're
they went
absolutely
through, and
real
that's
ants,
like
yeah.
super fucking cool that they were able to get this much footage.
It's a
of all of
ton.
this.
Like,
Yeah.
I was already blown away just by like the opening sequence of like these ants like forming their tunnels and stuff, and like following a single ant as it's like going throughout the hive and like meeting the queen and stuff. It's so much, and I was like, whoa, that's really fucking cool. And then like a good majority of the movie is that stuff, this really kind of surreal alien-esque.
Yeah.
And they could have gone the way of movies like Them, where they make them giant.
I was
or they make
expecting them
more-
to be giant
I thought,
ants, yeah.
that they would absolutely do that, because I thought, how are you gonna make just like little tiny ants interesting? But
They
there's
do
just so
it,
much. There's
yeah.
so much detail put into just that hive mind mentality they have with the queen operating it all, and how they're all just like little cells of a giant bigger body. And from there, it kept me interested all the way through from that point on.
And there's like, they're building like these weird like towers and pylons,
which like
and stuff.
just very, very cool, just like striking visuals outside of all
once
the tiny
again,
ants.
Saul Bass brings a great sense of design to those too.
Yeah,
Like,
it reminded me very much of like the monoliths in 2001, like that, the kind of like stark geometric
very
shapes,
angular.
very angular, but it's like there's something very alien about it.
Yeah, well, the first ones we see where they're just like really tall statues with like mouth things.
Yeah, that's
really cool.
They like tilt back at the top, and they have like these openings, and then later on when they surround the research installation with these like pyramid like things that are super shiny on one side, so that like the sun is like,
right, they're assaulting the base
with like a magnifying glass,
Right,
kind
yeah,
of like
'cause-
using the sun reflecting off of all of these installations to like cook the base,
they're-
which I think
they're
is really
warfare.
which I think is really smart to have the ants using that kind of warfare when little kids always will like cook ants under a magnifying glass using the
Right.
sun, and it's now they're kind of like doing the same thing.
I feel like movies like this are made by screenwriters or directors that just like they squashed one too many ants when they were kids, and they just grew up thinking like, God, what if they wanted revenge?
Right,
This
and
is just
which is
there.
why I was thinking this was going to be super schlocky, and it's really not.
No, it
Honestly,
takes
it's
itself
one of the
pretty
most
seriously.
intelligent, like, sci-fi horror movies I've seen.
I think so too. I can definitely agree with that.
Which might be to its detriment at some points in the middle, because it slows down, and it wants to. It's not trying to keep providing all these crazy set pieces, but it might not be as grabbing as some of the earlier stuff.
I will agree that it does get extremely dry at points. In a lot of the parts where the scientists are sort of trying to figure out what step to take next, there's two scientists. There's the one who's sort of your like stereotypical mad scientist who's so obsessed with
Right, he's the one who's been like really following this ant thing going on, and
Right.
the other scientist is just sort of brought along because he knows a lot about animal communications.
Right, he was figuring out ways to like communicate with like whales or something
Yeah,
like
right,
that. And so he gets brought along to try to find ways to communicate with these ants, which
it's
I
almost
thought
like a rival in a way, like about
A
trying
little
to
bit,
communicate with
yeah.
something, and the basis of communication, because they have these like wave detectors that are like focusing in on the ants, like little chirps and squeaks, so they can figure out what commands they're like being ordered to do, like go and stop. And
Yeah, it definitely gave me Arrival vibes. It also kind of reminded me of Annihilation. Like
the end for sure. The ending
especially
for sure.
especially, you know, like in comparison to Annihilation, though, I feel like these scientists definitely feel like scientists. They
Feel more like
hard
scientists.
science
Right,
throughout a lot
yeah.
of the movie, which I think is really cool. I think the fact that, you know, like, it does get dry, but the fact that scientists are actually doing science is
Right.
kind of...
I mean, yeah, they're scientists and they're using science to solve their problems.
Yeah.
You know, which I think is cool. I do think even though you're using science as like a vehicle for like problem solving, I do think that like some of the science stuff starts to go a little bit above the average viewer's head, and that's where it starts to get a little bit dry. That's what it did for me, at least. They start getting like really technical with some of their explanations, and then I just sort of would like drift off,
Right.
you know, like
I enjoyed that, though. I mean, I think they did a lot of cool things with the science.
yeah,
too.
for sure. Well, the
with
way the ways they were
code
communicating,
talking.
yeah, and using like communicating with the ants through like geometric
those detector things, right.
shapes and stuff like that. And some of the scenes that they did in that part were really cool, like when we see a single ant in their like computer like trying to gnaw through the
Oh, yeah,
wires,
that's right.
and there's a praying mantis that had escaped from like its cage earlier.
Yes, which
And-
there are two things that I really hate more than anything else. I hate close-up images of bugs, and I hate footage of bugs eating other bugs. And this movie delivers on both of those. And I found it incredibly just uncomfortable, which I know a lot of people probably don't like bugs. So
Well,
this is
right,
just-
because they're super weird. And
Yeah.
the way they move and stuff is very uncomfortable.
And I was thinking,
but-
because they have shots of the Queen, of course, and I was thinking just like with, I mean, it was giving me just like super flashbacks to like Aliens, just
Yeah.
the alien Queen releasing all the eggs, and I thought, God, why do we need aliens to think of anything horrifying like this? We already got these on Earth; they're just tiny.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
you look at
Thank God.
you look at a lot of science fiction, whether it's in books, movies, video games, and a lot of aliens are
Just like-
basically bugs,
Right,
You know,
yeah.
because it's like they're like bugs, or if you're looking at like Lovecraft, they're like deep sea creatures.
Yeah.
Because it's like those are like the most horrifying, bizarre, unlike us things there are on the planet. So it's like, you have to have some sort of context, you know.
Well, I think this movie does something kind of rare, where it takes something that would normally not be imposing or scary, and it turns it on its head in a way that makes it imposing and scary. There's a great sense of dread throughout this whole movie that I love. They go to a nearby like farmhouse where a family is living. The family had already set up like a moat of gasoline around their house to protect them from the ants.
Right.
But the scientists basically tell them you have to leave immediately. Like, these ants are gonna fuck up your life.
Right. But then they don't leave.
Yeah, they don't leave quite fast enough is the problem.
And they end up getting their lives fucked up by the ants.
Yeah, the ants find a way to light the gasoline on fire, if I remember correctly.
No, I think that they start seeping in and they
attack the horse first.
Right.
The ants attack the horse. They swarm the horse and bite it to death, and then they attack the farmhouse, and they manage to get into their truck and make it almost all the way to the research installation, and then end up getting killed. Well, no, I guess they get out and they try to go into the installation, and the scientists like release this new chemical that they've been working on to kill the ants, and it just like coats everything.
Poison spray.
It's
Poison
like a
spray.
thick yellow pesticide.
Poison pudding.
Yeah, poison
I
pudding.
thought it was really cool. It was like grimy and it had like chunks in it and stuff.
Well, what I thought was super cool was after that, because it does work on the ants at first, and then we get that scene of one of the ants like carrying a piece of like the solidified poison back to the queen, and the ant keeps dying, and then another one will come along and bring it back some of the way, and then dies, and then another one until it gets to the queen, and then the queen eats a little piece and she lays a yellow egg, and then we see that she's like introduced the poison into like their DNA,
right? So
now
they're immune.
So now they're immune to it, and now that like when they bite, it's like poisonous. So I thought that was a really cool
they do
idea.
They do a really good job with hyper-evolution in the movie. Like every threat to their survival is met with some sort of solution, which I thought was really cool. Yeah, but the girl of the family survives.
Yeah, the granddaughter survives, and she hides in like a cellar or something from the poison spray, and they bring her into the research facility. And of course, the one guy wants to, call for an evac to get them out of there, and then the one super driven scientist is like, no, we can't do that. He's been bitten, and his arm just keeps like swelling up
keeps
throughout
getting bigger
the movie.
and bigger, right?
and then the ants come in and they chew through some of the electronics and fuck up everything, so they're trapped.
The thing is too, like, he was bitten because they had this big like maze for the ants to go through, like a glass maze, and then the girl comes in and just immediately smashes it,
great going,
letting
woman.
out all the killer ants.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really funny. The ants are obviously inside of their base.
Yeah.
And even outside, they had set up like reflective obelisks, I guess you could say,
kind of
around the whole thing, just shining light and increasing the temperature inside. And they chew out the air conditioning unit, so the temperature is just increasing steadily.
But not enough to actually like kill them, and they have a respite during the nighttime, of course. And at a certain point, the scientists realize that just like they were trying to study the ants and see what they would do in response to like external threats, that the ants are now doing the same thing to them. They're like putting them in this situation where they're trapped, and every day they're being heated up to uncomfortable levels, and none of their equipment is working. It's like, what are they gonna do? So it's like, it does a really good job of reversing the roles of like the studier and the one who's being studied. I thought that was a really cool idea.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool too. I think using the idea of a hive mind is really cool in this movie.
Yeah,
because
it does it really well too.
Yeah, I think more than anything, that's what makes the ants scary in this movie, is because they work as a collective unit.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, that's why, like, there's like more ants on this planet than like all other species combined or something like that. And like, why don't they just take over? Well,
Right,
because
what if
they're
they want revenge?
because they
We're
have
helpless.
super simple rudimentary intelligence, you know? And this movie is like, well, what if they were just as smart as we are or smarter?
Yeah.
And it does make these little tiny things that you're so used to just squishing when you see them makes them fucking scary.
Yeah, well, and it's easy to buy too, because it's stupid to think a single ant would have as much, if not more, intelligence than us. But as a hive,
Right.
as a hive mind, it's more plausible.
I just would love to know how they got the ants to do the things they did behind the scenes, like when they were filming. Like, how did they guide them? How did they get them to do certain things?
Yeah.
Because like the scenes they shoot with the ants, like all the macro stuff is really fucking cool, and they're doing very specific things, and I would love to know how they did that.
From what I read, they had a specific nature photographer that did all of the macro sequences.
That would make
with the
sense.
ants.
It's
So-
very Planet Earthy.
Yeah,
if Planet
yeah.
Earth was like an alien movie.
Yeah, well, it's weird because it bounces between very much Planet Earthy stuff and more abstract stuff. Like,
Yeah.
we get super close-ups of like the eyes of the ants, and they're just these weird textures that are like,
And they start like
rotating,
kaleidoscoping
yeah.
them and stuff. Yeah, they do all this really fantastic surreal imagery. Should we start getting into the ending, because there's definitely some stuff to talk
yes,
about there. And the lost ending.
yes.
At a certain point, they basically just wander off into the desert. The girl goes first, I guess, to try to... She feels guilty about letting the ants loose in the research facility, so she kind of like sacrifices herself to distract
Right,
them.
just a good way to write her off. Just say, like,
Right,
"All
well,
we
they
couldn't really do
decide-
anything with you.
They decide that the only way to save themselves is to kill the queen, because she's the heart of the hive mind, and that once the queen is dead, then all of the ants will go back to just being ants. And then the other two try to go out into the desert, and the mad scientist guy falls into a trap that the ants have built, just like a big pit with all these little tiny holes in the wall, and they just pour out and cover him and bite the shit out of him to death. But then the last remaining guy finds their mound and slides down inside it, and when he does, there's this really weird scene. This is where I definitely agree with the Annihilation comparison, where like the girl sort of like rises up out of this big pile of sand and like goes to embrace him, and then we get this voiceover that the ants wanted us all along, so I don't know if they're like mind controlling, like trying to mind control the people or something. It's not really explored. They just sort of like walk off into the sunset.
I think it's less mind control and more control over...
It's assimilation.
You know, like, the ants have gone to the top of the food chain, essentially.
Yeah. Well, no, that's what I get too, but I'm wondering if like the ants are like inside of her and like pulling her strings, like literally, if that's like how they're doing that. If she's just like a big old ant sack.
Maybe.
I
I feel
mean,
like
it's-
this movie is so grounded that that seems a little less likely than the ants having total control over them.
But that begs the question, how do they exert their control? I mean, obviously they're the dominant species now, but how are they controlling?
I think that might be a bit of an issue with the ending itself, and even the lost ending. which the lost ending is.
The Lost Ending could be a short film on its own. Man.
Yes, it's that same scene, but it is extended
For like 5 minutes.
Yeah, it becomes this like wild, crazy, psychedelic visual fest or feast. You could even say
this
that
montage with all of this weird symbolism with like the sun.
And they're running around on this, which almost felt like very like Hitchcock intro-esque, like them running behind, like running across these giant like flat plains and just like in this giant like green screen or whatever it was. That doesn't explain much else either.
Oh no! I mean, if anything,
man,
it
I
explains
loved it,
less.
though.
Right.
It's fantastic.
Originally Saul Bass had that as the ending.
Right.
That was the original intended ending of the movie.
Well, because it actually ends with the Phase 4 popping up. I
Yeah.
don't think it actually shows up
Yeah.
in the ending we saw.
That ending is super abstract, but I think it explains more about what they were trying to do with the ants.
Well, I mean,
Controlling
it implies
in a very abstract way.
It implies that the ants take over the earth.
Yeah, essentially.
And rule mankind. But like you said, an extremely abstract, surreal
Which I think, honestly,
way.
is the only way to do it in this kind of movie.
I
you know?
agree that it's fantastic.
It's super impressive because it's all shot on film, and like it's all practicals.
Well, I
that
mean,
they
back
do
in
these-
1974, like, what else would they shoot on?
Well, right.
Well,
but
exactly,
The
but,
fact that
like-
they still did
Yeah,
it so
yeah.
well, you know.
Yeah.
Some of the effects looked very modern, especially
Well,
like
it's just like
the
those
kaleidoscopic effects, and again, the Saul Bass sense of design in the whole ending sequence is incredible.
I think any shots of the ants that were going on, I thought were all great. I think those were just like really, they seem really inventive and something that I haven't really seen in any other movie before. Just how much time it must have taken, as you mentioned, to actually get in there and shoot these bugs.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, the thing is, after
Is that the right? Or is it insects?
before
Am I
the
being racist?
movie was released theatrically, the studio came in and cut out the ending because they were like, "This is too experimental and weird.
Well,
Can't
because
have that shit."
honestly, it probably is really weird. Because for the rest of the movie, I mean, besides from like the ants' point of view or things like that, there's nothing too bombastic as that lost ending seems to be. So I'm sure the way they saw it, they're like, what the fuck? We're trying to make a Hollywood movie over here.
I do think the lost ending is really fucking cool, but at the same time, I do see why they cut it. Just because nothing else in the movie reaches quite that level of surrealism.
Yeah. I
It's
think
that
that's-
peak of escalation. It's that annihilation type of thing where like it hits this climax and like the only way to represent what you're trying to go at is abstract and
Right. Which I think is cool, and I think it's the right way to do it. And I do prefer the lost ending.
It bums me out because the lost ending has only been shown at screenings. It's never gotten a home video release, the lost ending, and the only way we were able to watch it is there's a bootleg on YouTube
of somebody actually filming at a screening. Yeah, so you can find the lost ending, and the quality is not great, which I agree is kind of disappointing because I would love to see that lost ending as intended and not from an external camera in a theater.
I have my fingers crossed that one of these days we'll get a Criterion release with like a good transfer of that lost ending.
I could see that.
Because I think it's incredible, and I wish it was in the movie because I feel like it would have bumped up my rating of the movie probably by like half a star. But
maybe. I would definitely say if you seek this movie out after you've watched it, take the time to go onto YouTube and check out the lost ending.
It's about 5 minutes
just
long.
as like a supplement, despite the not great video quality of the recording. It's still very cool.
Yeah,
And very much worth checking out.
Absolutely. Yeah, are you guys good to jump into ratings?
Yeah.
That's cool, man.
Absolutely.
All right, well, I'll start off. I think this movie will surprise you. I mean, for a movie about killer ants, it is not really campy at all.
No.
It plays it very intelligently, follows these scientists around in a really intelligent way. It does get a little dry in the middle because it's so focused on the science of stuff, but I think that's kind of refreshing to see, especially for a concept that could easily jump into camp territory so easily. All of what they do in this movie is incredible. There's a sense of dread throughout the whole movie with these ants that are inescapable that I think is fantastically done. I really wish the lost ending was in the movie because I think it adds a lot to the finale and it wraps things up a little more. I guess you could say, I hesitate to say cleanly, but I think
it definitely gives you more to think about.
Yeah, it gives you more to think about, and I think it does the ants rule over the world thing the best way possible. It sticks the landing much better than the ending we get, but I think as a whole, this movie is definitely worth checking out. With the lost ending, I would give it a 4.5 pod, but as we watched it now, I'd probably give it a 4 out of 5.
Well, just for the sake of it, let's make our ratings with the lost.
Okay,
ending.
with the lost ending, I'd give it a 4.5 in that case.
Because the lost ending can be found. It is available on YouTube. It's not hard to find. So 4.5 for you, Ben. Mm-hmm. All right, Eugene.
Well, for me, the lost ending, it won't change my rating. I don't think it hurts the film that much, but I found it because I already assumed that the next step was for the ants. Just I didn't think their mission just ended with getting those two people. I sort of just assumed it was for bigger domination. So the lost ending just feels a bit excessive to me. But the rest of the movie, a lot of really great camera work. Just it's scientific and it's really great. I mean, when a movie can be intelligent enough to play with those ideas, and for it not to feel misused. I mean, I guess in something even like in Blood for Dracula, how they try to make this bigger statement between these two classes, and it just sort of doesn't work. It doesn't feel like it's executed right. But with this is the idea of the communication and the hive mind. I thought all really great stuff. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. The last ending just doesn't do much for me.
Yeah, I was very, very pleasantly surprised with this. This movie takes an extremely thoughtful and mature approach to somewhat of a ridiculous concept, to the extent that it does not seem like a ridiculous concept by the end of the movie. The sciencey stuff can get a little bit dry, but man, some of the surreal imagery and the way that these ants are approached from a narrative standpoint, man, it's got some fucking nature photography that would make David Attenborough cream his pants, I really enjoyed this movie a lot. I like the lost ending a lot, and I hope to see a Criterion release with that ending finally put in its proper place. I'm gonna also give this a solid 4 out of 5. This is a movie that I hadn't heard of before, and in that sense, I feel like it's extremely underrated. Like, this is definitely a film that's worth your time, worth checking out.
I really wish Saul Bass would have done more movies than just this one.
Yeah, I would love to see more of what he's capable of as a filmmaker, just based on this alone.
He has an incredible sense of design in this movie, and he put out one of the smartest sci-fi horror movies I think I've ever seen with this. So.
Yeah, I think I can agree with that. That will give Phase 4 a overall rating of 4.2 pods out of 5. Check that shit out. So for our final film of the day, we are going to be talking about Death Dream, also known as Dead of Night, directed by Bob Clark, who we have talked about at length on the podcast. As you may remember, he is the director of Black Christmas.
Yes,
Also came out in 1974.
In the same year as this.
Wow.
I would imagine that, oh shit, I was gonna say I would expect this to have come out early in the year, but it came out in August of 1974, and then Black Christmas was around Christmas time. Although I believe I read that this film was in production in 72. So
that would make sense because there's a point where they specifically reference 1972.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a little odd.
Bob Clark is a great director, and it's weird to me that he sort of drifted away from horror after Black Christmas, because it seems like a lot of his early films were horror, and then he ended up getting into like A Christmas Story and Porky's and The Karate Dog and Baby Geniuses.
Yeah, well, it seemed like from what I've read, like a lot of the horror movies he made weren't super well received when they came out,
Which is a shame.
I know he did Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things
Yeah.
in 73, and he also did these two. None of them particularly got good critical reception.
I think Black
when they
Christmas
came
was
out.
like the most successful, but even then, I don't think it made
Yeah.
like 6 million or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a shame because much like Black Christmas, I think this movie is fantastic.
I was really surprised by this movie.
This is my second time seeing it. I saw it a couple years ago and thought it was really great. It's a very loose adaptation of the short story The Monkey's Paw. Well, I don't know about you guys. I had to read that in like freshman year of high school.
I did not, so I don't know anything about the story.
It's good. It's like this family receives a mysterious like dead monkey's hand, and that when they make wishes, one of the fingers curls.
Oh, okay, all right.
And-
Well, I've seen that in pop culture and things like that.
Well, I mean, the it's basically like the moral is like be careful what you wish for,
Yeah.
because it sends back. It gives you your wish, but not in the way that you're expecting.
Right. That nice ironic genie type of twist.
Right. Well, the family, the son dies in a horrible accident in a factory, and they wish him back to life, but he comes back as like a horrible shambling monster.
Okay.
So
and-
that's the basic inspiration
Right.
for this.
It's really changed for the movie. They do a couple different things with the
it's about a young soldier who's killed in Vietnam who just shows up back at home one night, and he is obviously changed for the worse.
Yes, he returns the day. I believe it's the day that they're given the news that he was
They
killed.
receive a telegram that he was killed, and he shows up at like 4 a.m.
Right, and they show the mother is she's constantly talking about the son Andy.
Andy, yeah.
Right, just always saying like, oh, I hope Andy's okay, you know. Oh,
Yeah, when Andy comes home, we're gonna have to do this and this and this.
right, and the father and daughter are both like visibly uncomfortable because they can tell she's just like trying to cope with the fact that he's overseas. So
Well,
when they get the news,
at this point, they haven't received a letter from him in like
Right.
2 months or
Yeah.
something like that. So I think the father and the daughter suspect that he's dead. But the mother
they've come
just
to
can't
terms
accept
with it more.
or they're preparing for bad news,
Yeah.
where she's sort of just
I love how the mother and father are John Marley and I can't remember the woman's name.
Lynn Carlin.
Lynn Carlin. They were actually both in Faces and playing essentially the same roles, like a troubled husband and wife.
interesting. And that came out in 72.
I think it was much earlier. I think it was
Really?
I think
60s.
Faces was in the 60s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they're essentially reprising their roles from that movie, which I thought was really cool because Faces is one of my favorite movies.
68 is when Faces came
Oh,
out.
Yeah.
okay. Oh, wow.
They're essentially playing the same roles. I mean, even John Marley is, kind of an alcoholic in faces,
Yeah.
like he is in this movie. They do a really good job with the mother, not coming to terms with it. When the soldier comes with the bad news that the son is dead, the mother just can't bear it and insists that it's fake and goes into her room and just
Goddamn.
kind of wishes her son was alive.
Yeah, we get this shot of her sitting in a rocking chair, I guess in his room, holding a candle in the dark, just like whispering, like, you can't be dead, you have to come home, you promised you would come back. And I guess it's sort of that obsessive wishing that brings him back. That's one of the things I really like about this movie, is that it's never explained what brings him back. Whereas it, especially being based on the monkey's paw, it would be super easy for them to have the family meet like some creepy old gypsy who gives them a magical object.
Beware, the curse is real.
The death dream. But they Bob Clark does not do that. It's just this soldier comes back.
Yeah,
and
he comes back by hitchhiking with a trucker. The trucker picks him up, seeing him. He's a soldier on the side of the road, and he says nothing to the trucker.
Yeah, he's very stoic, and the trucker's found dead the morning after Andy shows up, and all Andy does is sit upstairs in his room, rocking in his rocking chair, and
on
staring
the way
out the
we get
window.
this great scene where the trucker stops at the diner.
Oh God, right.
To get a couple coffees for him and the soldier, and there's this very, very drunk old man.
Once again, Bob Clark showing insight, I suppose, on true alcoholism.
Yeah, right.
But it's the charming kind of alcoholism.
No, because
Can I see a menu?
and he asks the trucker, because the trucker mentions that he picks up a soldier, and he's like, "There's cider hours," and of course he says hours, and he's like, I thought we were being invaded. And, oh God, it was hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like the sherry drinking house mother in Black Christmas, Bob Clark just loves his drunk people, and the father in this movie as well. He hits the sauce.
Everybody's a drunk.
Yeah.
But we discover partway through the movie that Andy is basically just a corpse, and that he needs to inject himself with the blood of others in order to keep himself from rotting, which I think is a very interesting take on like a zombie. This is basically a zombie flick, honestly.
Yeah.
A very different original zombie flick, not your Romero type zombie.
Well, who knows? Maybe that might be even more original to a zombie than what Romero did, because I think that was sort of what they were before. There's like undead or like unnatural, but not necessarily like brain dead.
Not mindless walking
That's
corpses.
what I love about this movie. It's like a zombie movie, but he's still intelligent. He's just not there.
He's just totally apathetic and angry. That segues very nicely into a point that I wanted to make. What I think is so cool about this movie is that it's actually a really excellent depiction of PTSD before PTSD was even a term. The term post-traumatic stress disorder was coined in the 80s, I believe.
I mean, yeah,
and
but they called it other things back in the 70s. Like
shell-shocked and stuff like that. But it wasn't...
combat fatigue.
It wasn't studied up until that point. It was after so many people were coming home from Vietnam so irreparably damaged mentally and emotionally that they really started to study that, and then they eventually gave it its proper name. The zombie thing aside, like, he behaves like somebody with really bad PTSD. Super short temper, vacant stare, just sitting up in his room, rocking back and forth, totally apathetic towards his loved ones, his ex-girlfriend, stuff like that. And I think that that's a really interesting take on PTSD, to have him also be like a zombie.
Right,
that's the movie explanation for why he is the way he is.
Right.
But I mean, really, it's just a soldier with horrible PTSD.
And it shows not just the trauma of the soldier, but of the family in a way too.
Yeah, exactly.
The way how their lives have just been like twisted around. I mean, first with thinking he was dead, but now that he's there, but he's been like he's been stripped down, that he's not the person they knew before the war.
And the
He
mother
does a great job giving like a vacant stare too. He has one of the most imposing, scary glares I've seen in any movie.
That's actually why he was cast in this role.
Bob Clark saw him staring at him from across the street. He's like, "You're in my movie, you creepo."
No, this is the film debut of this actor, Richard Backus.
Okay.
And originally, Christopher Walken was supposed to play this role.
Oh.
But then Richard Backus came into a casting call, and he gave what they considered the creepiest vacant stare, and they're like,
Which Christopher Walken had some weird eyes in those days.
Right.
But.
Yeah. I'm very curious what this movie would be like with Christopher Walken.
I mean, just watch Deer Hunter. It's basically this role.
Yeah, shit. He's
a little more mature, but same kind of PTSD Walken that you get in this movie.
Right, well, yeah, he gets really aggressive with a neighbor, like a neighbor who makes himself welcome.
It was the mailman. It was the
mailman. He because they're having a barbecue, like a little picnic outside, because he's back home. They want to celebrate. He just walks over. He's like, "Oh, those egg salad sandwiches. Oh, don't mind if I do." And he just starts like
he's like, "Hey, can I have some of that sweet tea?"
Yeah, he just makes himself at home, and then he just starts talking about like, "Oh, you were deployed with this dude. Hey, how's he been doing? Haven't heard from him. Yeah, he's probably fine." And it gets the soldier Andy really angry, and he just storms off. But not before giving him just like that real imposing death stare onto him. Like, you shouldn't have said that.
Well, then later he kills the dog.
Oh God, right, and it's terrible.
Yeah, because all the kids come up to like try to talk to Andy finally because he's back.
Right, and the little dog keeps barking at him because, dogs can always sense ghosts or when something's wrong in any movie.
Yeah.
Just have the dog act crazy. And Andy just grabs that dog by the throat and, like, has it lifted up. And it's just...
in front of all these kids,
in front of all the children.
And that's the turning point for the father, where he already realizes that something's not right with Andy, but...
Right, because he just spends all his time rocking on that,
But that's when the father is like, this is not fucking right. Like, we need to do something about that. Like, he calls the doctor, and the whole time the mom is just, like, totally choosing to ignore everything weird about Andy because she's just so happy that he's home.
Well, does he call the doctor, or does he run into him at the bar? Because he goes to the bar.
That's right. He goes to the bar, and he's getting drunk because Andy killed the dog. And yeah, that's right. Then he sees the doctor and tells the doctor that Andy's been acting weird. Right,
that he had killed the doggy, because I guess that was really the father's dog. He loved that little poocher, and Andy killed it, and so now he's all torn up about it.
And he has the doctor come over and try to talk to him, and Andy is very withholding, doesn't really want to talk.
Right, and it's at this point the murder of the trucker's been spreading into town, and they know that it was a soldier he picked up, and so the doctor is he's asking him questions like, "Did you hitchhike here? Do you remember what his truck looked like?"
Yeah, like the doctor and the dad both suspect that Andy is the one who killed the trucker, which we know from the beginning is indeed the case. And then after the doctor leaves, Andy follows him back to his office and kills him. and takes his blood, stabs him to death with a big hypodermic needle, which seems like a very ineffectual.
He stabs
weapon.
him multiple times, leaving the tiniest of holes.
Right,
I think that the dad does a fantastic job balancing between frustration towards the son and like legitimately caring for him as a son. Like the whole reason that Andy ended up killing the doctor is because the doctor was going to call the cops immediately on Andy because he knows what's up. But the father told him, just wait until tomorrow. I'll see if I can talk to him about it.
And even after the doctor's murdered and the father knows about it, he goes to the police and he lies about the doctor like having another lead to try and throw them off the trail. Of his son. So even though at this point he knows that his son is the killer and has been murdering people, even murdering his friend, he wants to try and protect him.
He still doesn't think that he's totally unredeemable.
Right. Yeah. He still wants to try and protect him, or just like the hope that that there's something good inside of him. But it's at this point when he's really started to degrade.
Well, let's talk about the makeup effects in this movie. This is actually Tom Savini's first feature film as a makeup artist, the fucking legendary Tom Savini. Right,
as you might know from, if you don't know about his work on Dawn of the Dead, then you might have recognized him from the movie itself as the machete-wielding motorcyclist. And he's also been in other films like From Dusk Till Dawn as, I forget his name, Sex Machine or something, but he's got the revolver around his crotch.
Oh, that was Tom Savini. Yep. You're right.
So he, acting as much as he's done makeup, but
one of the greatest makeup artists of all time for horror and blood and gore.
Absolutely.
And I mean, even in such an early film in his career like this, you really see the talent that's already there.
Yeah, because I mean, with Dawn of the Dead, that whole movie was super low budget. So the zombies in those movies are basically just like purple. That's their zombification.
Well, with this movie, a lot of the effects are withheld until like the third.
Until the
act.
end,
It's very, very gradual.
Well, when he goes after the doctor, we see a little bit of it. His skin just looks kind of like papery, like real dry and wrinkly, and then he's fine after he kills the doctor. But then at the end, when he goes on a double date with his ex-girlfriend and his sister and her boyfriend to the drive-in,
dressed like he's in a synth pop band.
Wearing a white turtleneck and sunglasses and black leather gloves, because he started to deteriorate at this point and he doesn't want them to see that. But man, that's when the shit really, really picks up. He kills his ex-girlfriend in the back seat of the car and is like drinking her blood like a vampire, and his glasses fall off and he's got these like crazy monster eyes and his skin is all falling apart and shit. And then just there for like the last 15 minutes of the movie, like basically every couple of shots he's like more and more degraded until he just looks like a decaying corpse with all of his skin falling off. And man, the ending gets fucking crazy. Like it's a pretty slow burn of a film up until the last 15-20 minutes or so.
Right, and then bodies just start piling up. When he kills his ex-girlfriend, he manages to get control of the car and he runs over somebody because it's in this drive-in theater. Yeah. It's obviously just a dummy and they show the car like running over the dummy, but I thought like that usually isn't seen in movies because it either might be like too goofy or just too graphic, because I like it was a real punch for me, like seeing it get like tossed around like under the wheels.
It's crazy. And then the cops start chasing him
and they start shooting the fuck out of him.
Yeah, well, he goes back to the house And then the cops start chasing them, and his mom is driving him as he's like falling apart. And then the fucking car catches on fire. And that chase scene is great. Just like screeching down the roads in this little town in Florida with just like flames billowing out of the back of the car.
Yeah,
it's
shit.
fucking rad.
That's awesome.
But I love to, like, there are two cops. One of them says freeze. And Andy stops, and that just gives the other cop an opportunity to shoot him. It's like, freeze! Nice, got you right where I want you. And they just immediately fire.
One of those cops was Bob Clark himself.
Oh, yes, that's right.
In a cameo playing one of the cops.
He seems to really like his cops, because, like, Black Christmas is almost as much like a detective story than it is just like a home invasion movie.
Well, I guess they used a lot of the same music from Death Dream in Black
a lot
Christmas.
of the dissonant
strings
cues and stuff.
I thought the music was great.
Yeah, no, the music is incredible. I thought it worked really well, especially in the doctor scene. I thought that was probably the most effective.
Yeah, exactly. And then at the end, he has his mom drive him to the graveyard where he has carved himself a tombstone and dug a very shallow grave, and he crawls into it and starts just like trying to cover himself with dirt, like as he's falling apart.
I love that little thing that they put in showing that he had carved his date into that gravestone, because they don't explain a lot about why he came back. I mean, we have the mother, pleading for him to come back in his room, but that it's almost like he doesn't even want to be alive anymore. That he doesn't want to like just die immediately. He's not trying to kill himself, but that it's almost this torture for him too. To, as he mentions to the doctor, how he doesn't have to eat or sleep or do anything like that anymore. And so,
because he has no natural bodily functions.
Right, he's just sort of like a moving husk.
He's living in this state of limbo where he's like instinctually driven to kill and preserve himself, but the remaining intelligence that he has knows that is not any sort of existence.
Yeah.
So he's expecting his own death, and it makes you wonder if the reason he makes such a big scene at the drive-in killing all of these people is like, now I have to die, like
just to go out with a bang.
Yeah, go out with a bang. And I think that's great, that last scene of him crawling into his grave and just trying to cover himself with dirt. And then we get that last shot of when the cops pull up and his mom is like kneeling by the grave and she's like, Andy came home. And then it just like pans up into the trees.
Yeah,
that was a great ending.
Just unsettling and doesn't leave you feeling like any of these characters are going to be any better off. This is all just, it's been a very bad time for them.
Well, yeah, and I mean, that's really true to the themes of the Monkey's Paw. Like, you be careful what you wish for, because it might come back to bite you, you might get your wish, but not in the way that you want.
Right.
In a way that makes everything much worse,
Overall, though, just another great surprise film that we got to see from this era. Just knowing that this was the same year Texas Chainsaw and Black Christmas came out.
Yeah,
I know Texas Chainsaw was much bigger.
This was a great year for Bob Clark. Like two absolutely phenomenal horror movies in one year, like released within a few months of each other.
Yeah, and it shows that there was more experimenting with the genre than I ever gave 74 credit on. That you have so many more weirder things that were being made, like that Arrival and Annihilation seem so incredibly unique and awesome, and they are, but that these sort of ideas have been explored in a movie as old as this, as old as like Phase 4,
right?
And it's
I mean, it's really interesting to sort of get a little taste of like what some of the fears were in the early 70s, like what the zeitgeist was like, is so shortly post Vietnam, still in the Cold War, starting to take our first steps into space and stuff like that, and wondering about like threats from beyond.
Yeah.
That's sort of what we're getting with in Phase 4, and then like the damage of Vietnam that we're getting in Death Dream, and then the sexual liberation and fear of communism and Marxism that we're sort of getting in Blood for Dracula. Like, it's I would definitely like to do an episode like this in the future where we pick a year and just pull some movies again.
Yeah,
because
I
agree.
I think this is
I think we get some really unique stuff.
yeah, and just being able to get such a different collection of films, like all three of these movies are totally different.
Oh, yeah.
But to still be able to look at them as a whole and see like what are some things that people were afraid of in 1974. And so, yeah, I'm very happy we did this. Do we want to rate Death Dream?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll start it off. Just like Black Christmas, it hits on a deeper psychological level than I would have expected. That it explores more of the mental state of these characters, which I think is always great. As I had mentioned, I think in that Black Christmas episode, that great horror is usually psychological, or it plays with your mind in some way, and just it changes the way you feel, or that you understand these characters because you've gotten to see that change. I love that it didn't have that moment in Act 2 where they run into the mystic old man who explains everything and how to stop it. It just sort of is it's chaos and pain that ends in tragedy, for them to never be the same and for the family dynamic to be torn apart. So I'm going to give it a 4.5. I highly recommend this. Just this and Black Christmas are like just some great horror movies that should be seen.
Yeah, I really agree with everything you just said. I love that they don't delve too much into explanation and that they just let it exist. I think that's a very mature approach to a movie like this. I would not be surprised at all if Jacob's Ladder owes some of its things to this movie, because they remind me of each other in certain ways. Jacob's Ladder is a great film. If you haven't seen that, check it out. I will say the one thing that we didn't talk about that I did find extremely frustrating about this movie is whoever they had on camera op could not pull focus to save their fucking life.
I forgot about that.
I know, because it's such a good movie that in the grand scheme of things, it really ends up being rather minor. But there's so many scenes where like the background is in perfect focus, but the actors are just slightly out of focus. So whoever they had on that fucking camera, I sure hope that later in life they got better at pulling focus. Because there's one scene in the car at one point where there's a rack focus from the front seat to the back seat, and you can see that they hit that focus for a split second and then go past it and make it out of focus again. And that was so fucking annoying to me. But I don't want to end talking about this movie on a bad note. Really fucking good. Bob Clark is an underrated fucking horror filmmaker, in my opinion. To have this and Black Christmas so close together, two horror movies that I just think are absolutely fantastic. I'm also going to give this a 4.5 out of 5. It's a really, really good movie that is exploring some much bigger ideas and takes a really interesting approach to like a zombie film.
I feel the same way about a lot of the stuff you guys were saying. We should emphasize this movie is under an hour and a half. It's a super short movie. It doesn't overstay its welcome.
At all.
At all. It's excellently paced. More than anything, I was impressed by the acting in it. I thought Richard Backus, who plays Andy, was incredible. His vacant stare, his seething anger just seeped through every frame with him in it. I also thought the parents were incredible in it. Maybe that's just because Faces is so near and dear to my heart, but they both did a great job. And they do the zombie monster thing in such a unique, original way that I've never seen before. They take this post-Vietnam anxiety and, mesh it with this monkey's paw fable. Such a unique interpretations of the horrors of, loss and war and post-war stress that I think is really unique and interesting. I think this is a nearly perfect film. The only minor thing would be the focus stuff that you were talking about. Honestly, I would give this a 5 out of 5. I think this is an excellent movie and definitely worth checking out.
All right, well, that will give Death Dream, aka Dead of Night, an average rating of 4.6 out of 5 pods. So, we don't have a game this week, but we do have some news that we should probably address. This will likely be our final full-length episode, all recording in the same room, at least for a while. At the end of this month, Ben and I are moving to North Carolina to do some work with Light Arc Studios and get our game up and running and kickstarted.
And I'm moving back to New York because I've gotten in trouble, so I need to flee the state.
Before them Wisconsin police get a hold of you.
Right, and I don't know how much I can really talk about it because I don't know all the details about what it means to be charged with attempted arson. So it's it's whatever. I didn't know the daycare was full. So that's really all. It's sad. We're all gonna be.
Having a hook for a hand really shouldn't be a crime.
No, it shouldn't. People look at me funny.
Well, fortunately, the good news is this is not the end of the show. We're going to keep doing this. We'll be recording from our own separate places and still bringing you those episodes. But the next few weeks will probably be just mini pods, because obviously we have a lot of stuff to get sorted in our respective moves, and we won't have as much time to record and work on the show as we have in the past. So we're working on putting together a few weeks of mini episodes backlog that will hold you over until we're able to put together another full-length episode once we're settled in our respective states. So fear not, the show will go on. It's definitely something that we want to keep doing because we enjoy bringing you these episodes. So for the next few weeks, look for some mini reviews. We'll have stuff like Get Out and Piranha 3D and some really fun things that we're going to be talking about. Hopefully getting a guest on for one or two of those before we leave the state. So thank you as always for listening. If you like the show, you can leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, @PodPeoplePod. Send us those tasty emails, podpeoplepod@gmail.com. Fill up our bellies with your thoughts and questions. You can follow me on Twitter @Mr. Van Awesome. The show is produced and scored by Ben and edited by me. Do you guys have anything that you would like to plug before we sign off?
Follow me on Twitter @Mr. Sheets. Read some dank memes.
The dankest. Eugene?
I've just recently been sponsored by Amazon to start playing Fortnite streaming, and I'm going to be the best. So right now I am at 0 wins. I've put in about 10 hours, and I'm banking on it. I need to get that Prime money. So if you want to check me out on my streams, it's Fortnite, all Fortnite. So just keep an eye out, please. So that's it for me.
Shout out Bezos.
Yeah, shout out Bezos. Thank you.
Thanks for that good iguana eating money. All right. Well, until next time, thank you so much for listening. I'm Matisse Van Rossum.
I'm Ben Sheets.
And I am Eugene Lundeen.
and don't have the death dream. Or, I don't know. Don't cover yourself in honey and feed yourself to ants. I know I was suggesting that earlier, but it's bad.